Quick demo of some of the patches we're going to work out during this video. This video is long, so I'm going to keep the preamble short. First off, yes, the Matriarch has a hidden ring modulator, but it's really not that hidden. More on that later. There's an index in the description so you can skip to the parts you want. I'm going to start the video off with about 5 minutes or so of theory about ring modulators. Then I'll experiment with an actual ring modulator and show you how to set up a ring modulator on the Matriarch. Then I'll go through a bunch of patch ideas and techniques and even talk about some of the uses for a ring modulator. At the very end of the video, I'm even going to try to set up a semi-generative patch with ring modulation. Just a quick warning before we begin, there are parts of this video that are really loud and screechy, so if you're listening on headphones, be ready to adjust the volume. Okay, on to the theory. Let's start at the beginning. Modulation is any process in which one waveform is changed in response to the contour of another waveform. For instance, volume modulation, or in synth terms, amplitude modulation, is the shaping of the amplitude of one waveform by the contour of another waveform. When talking about modulation, especially when two waves are involved, you'll probably hear a bunch of different terms. I'm going to go old school and use carrier and program, which come from the days of AM radio. A transmitting tower consists of a very high frequency called the carrier, which has been amplitude modulated by an audio signal, usually somebody's voice, called the program. Most ring modulator modules and pedals still use this terminology, so we'll stick with it for this video. Okay, so what is ring modulation? In simple terms, for synth dummies like me, ring modulation is just a special type of amplitude modulation. And when we think of amplitude modulation, you'd probably think of a VCA. So let's take a quick look at VCAs and how they work. Basically, a VCA controls the amplitude or volume of the program. A VCA is technically a two-quadrant multiplier. A two-quadrant multiplier has two inputs and one output. The first input, the program input, accepts bipolar, both positive and negative waves. Sound waves are bipolar. So we need a bipolar input if we want to allow audio to pass through without it being affected in some way. The two quadrants the name refers to work like this. The program signal can be multiplied. Wait, I should talk about that term as well. When we amplify or turn up a wave, we are multiplying, not adding to. We're multiplying the amplitude of the wave. And amplifying or multiplying the amplitude has no effect on the frequency. So for example, here's a triangle wave with a low amplitude, and here's another of the same frequency with a high amplitude. The amplitude has been multiplied. The highs and lows are higher voltage, but the frequency has not changed. So in plain English, the wave is louder, but the pitch is not changed. Okay, we all knew that already, but it's important to know that in a two-quadrant multiplier, the program can be multiplied when it is both positive and negative. If the program input accepts only unipolar waves, in other words, a single quadrant multiplier, then we'd only hear portions of the wave, with silence in between when the program was in negative portions of the wave. This is called half-wave rectification, and that's a topic for another day. The second input, the control input, is unipolar, meaning it is always positive or zero. It does not cross into negative voltage. It's easiest to think of it like this. The program signal can be multiplied. Not adding to. We're multiplying the amplitude of the wave. With silence in between when the program was in negative portions of the wave. This is called half-wave rectification, and that's a topic for another day. The second input, the control input, is unipolar, meaning it is always positive or zero. It does not cross into negative voltage. It's easiest to think of it like this. Once the volume is already all the way down and you can't hear anything, turning it down further is not going to do anything. You may have noticed this if you tried to modulate a VCA with a bipolar wave. You'd hear extended silence while the wave is in its negative portion of the wave. So you might be asking, what happens if we have a VCA that can accept two bipolar waves? Well, that's called a 4-quadrant multiplier. A 4-quadrant multiplier can multiply a positive signal by a negative voltage to produce a negative output, or a negative signal by a negative voltage to produce a positive output. Maybe this little ultra-simplified diagram will help. So a 2-quadrant multiplier, a VCA, can multiply a positive or negative signal by a positive voltage. A 4-quadrant adds the ability to multiply a positive signal by a negative voltage and a negative signal by a negative voltage. Okay, I hope that cleared a few things up. But what does this actually sound like? And what happens when we modulate a bipolar wave at audio rate with another bipolar wave? Well, neither of the two input frequencies will appear at the output. Instead, two new frequencies appear. One is equal to the sum of the two input frequencies, and the other is equal to the difference between the two frequencies. So, for instance, if we fed a sine wave at 500 Hz into the first input and a sine wave at 100 Hz into the second, then the output contains a 600 Hz sine wave and a 400 Hz sine wave. The resultant output, though, is a complex waveform. It looks like a 500 Hz sine wave that is amplitude modulated around its center axis by a 100 Hz sine wave. When you listen to it, you hear two pitches, 400 and 600 Hz, but you do not hear the original 500 or 100 input signals. Okay, so it's easy enough to understand if we're dealing with sine waves, but what happens if our program material is a complex wave with a lot more harmonics, like a square, for instance? In that case, the output contains the sum and difference frequencies between all the harmonics of the first input and the single frequency of the second input. A square wave contains only odd harmonics, so if we had a square wave at 500 Hz, the fundamental or first harmonic, in other words, the note we hear as the root, is 500 Hz. The third harmonic would be at 1500 Hz, the fifth would be at 2500 Hz, the seventh would be at 3500 Hz, and so on and so on. If we modulated the square wave with a sine wave at 100 Hz, then the resultant spectrum would contain components whose frequencies are 400 Hz, 600 Hz, just like the first example, but also 1400 Hz, 1600 Hz, 2400 Hz, 2600 Hz, 3400 Hz, and 3600 Hz, and so on and so on. And the resulting wave would be very complex, containing a lot of harmonics. But still the amplitude is modulated around its center axis by the 100 Hz sine wave. The term 4-quadrant multiplier isn't used that much anymore. I know Andrew Osler at Expert Sleepers uses it as one of the disting algorithms, but normally we just call them ring modulators, or sometimes voltage polarizers, like in the Mutable Instruments Blinds module, or for us Matriarch users, a voltage-controlled attenuverter? Yep, that's right. A voltage-controlled attenuverter is a 4-quadrant multiplier. So you just sat through 5 minutes of theory, when I could have just told you that the Matriarch has 3 ring modulators all ready to be patched. They're just not labeled that way. So let's patch one up and try it out. For my program wave, I'm just going to use oscillator 1, set to triangle wave. Okay, there we go. Don't need to use a triangle wave. We could modulate anything. But we do need to make sure our attenuverter is centered and at 0. And I'm just going to patch out of our direct out of the wave output into the input on the attenuverter. And I'm going to be using mult cables for this so we can check everything out on the scope. Okay, next for the carrier wave, I'm going to use the sine LFO from the mod bay. Again, going to the scope, and that's going to go into the CV control input on our attenuverter. I'm starting with triangles and sine waves because neither have too much harmonic content. And those are the waves used in most typical or classic ring mod patches. Anyway, we're going to go out of the attenuator into the mixer input. And it's as easy as that. We now have a ring modulator. So I'm slowly going to turn up the frequency of the carrier wave. And below audio rate, we'll get some tremolo. And if we just keep pushing into audio rate, well, you hear it. There we go. Awesome. And we can go pretty high with this LFO. Nice. Later on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about carrier wave frequencies, but for now, let's just play. We've done a lot of theory. Nice. I like it there. But you can go pretty high with the carrier wave to start, maybe just a little bit over 2 octaves. Sounds pretty good. Got a ring modulator. Okay, let's check it out on the scope. Okay, let's start by taking a look at our triangle wave, our program wave. And I'm just going to slow down the time on the scope so we can see the triangle. Let's freeze it. There we go, triangle wave. Okay, and let's take a look at our carrier, the sine. I'll do the same thing, just freeze that. Yep, sine wave, no surprises so far. All right, let's take a look at the resultant wave, our ring-modded wave. Awesome. Sounds cool and looks really cool too. Okay, I'm going to zoom or slow down my scope so I can show you what I was talking about when I said the program wave is being amplitude modulated around its center axis by the carrier. Just a little more. There we go. Isn't that pretty? Alright, I'm going to add the triangle wave back to the scope, but I'm going to keep it out of the audio paths just so things don't get too muddy. And there it is, and you can hopefully see how things are lining up there. So let's add in our carrier wave. Awesome. I hope being able to see what's going on clarifies any questions you might have about amplitude modulation around the center axis of the carrier. Okay, going to get rid of the program and carrier wave so we can just take a look at our ring mod wave again. And I'm going to zoom back out so we can have a closer look at this. In the simplest terms, and this is not 100% correct, you could think of it as the carrier cutting out a portion of the program wave. Anyway, at the very least, it shows us that our attenuverters can be used as ring modulators. Okay, let's put some more of that theory to the test and check out the frequencies of these waves. So the program wave, the triangle wave, is roughly at 130 hertz, a C3. And let's check out the carrier wave. Okay, it's around 274 hertz, we'll call it, and it's a C#4. It's a little flat, but that's okay. All right, so I've added a software instrument, Serum, just set up as a sine wave in my DAW so that we can compare those pitches and check this math out. All right, time for some more math, but I'll be quick though. All right, our program wave, our triangle wave is 130 hertz, and our carrier wave is 274 hertz. So the ring mod output is going to be 130 plus 274, which is 404 hertz. And 274 minus 130 is 144 hertz. You might be thinking, hey, you flipped the program and carrier wave when you found the difference. But it doesn't really matter. If I did it the other way around, 130 minus 274, the difference is still 144. It's just negative. It's not going to matter because our waves are bipolar. We're still going to hear that 144 hertz. All right, to the internet to find out what those frequencies are in pitch. Okay, 404 hertz is equal to a G#4. It's about 50 cents flat. And 144 hertz is a D3, a little lower. It's also a little flat. And let's have a listen again to that ring mod. Now the tuner says it's a D, but you can hear the two pitches. There's obviously a lot more going on than just a D. And it's in the wrong octave anyway. Okay, I'll play a D3 on the Serum. And add in the ring mod. Yep, that D is there. It's not in tune, but it's there. And there's our A flat. Same thing, it's there, it's just not in tune. Play them both together. Yep, so the math was correct. We've got a ring mod, and we'll never have to do that math again. That was kind of a joke about the math, but it's true both ways. It really is more important to just use your ears to find sounds. It's more fun and creative that way too. But the math can help you out if you're stuck and want to try to get a more predictable sound or harmony. But really, when dealing with ring modulation, it's important to just embrace the dissonance. Okay, so let's try to make this into a patch. I'm going to start with an arpeggiator. Oh yeah, and remember that the Matrix arpeggiator can work as kind of an on-the-fly step sequencer if you repeat some notes while you hold the other ones down. And you can hear that. Anyway, let's speed it up. Okay, and I'm gonna go for sort of a classic sound, classic punchy sound, so it's really gonna get a short decay and fairly short release from our amp envelope generator. Of course, get rid of the sustain. There we go. Okay, and I'm just gonna experiment with the frequency of the carrier wave. No math this time, just gonna do it by ear and try to find a sound I like. And this LFO can go pretty high. If there's a big difference between the frequencies of the carrier and program waves, then the resultant wave is not going to be very different from either the carrier or the program. That's why when the carrier is at low speeds, it sounds like tremolo, and obviously at high speeds, it sounds more like the carrier. Anyway, I'm just trying to find a sound I like. Kind of glassy here, it's nice. But let's try a little slower. I like that kind of bubbly sound you get down low. Cool. Okay, since we're already going slower, might as well show you the tremolo again. So the program wave becomes more prevalent. As the carrier is slower, it sounds like tremolo because there's a big difference in the frequencies. That's okay. This knob is really sensitive. Going for that 1950s sci-fi Forbidden Planet type sound. Okay, I'll go with that for now. Let's add in some delay. Tighten up that envelope a little bit more. Alright, what next? Okay, let's mess around with the filter a little bit. It's in low pass mode. But low pass takes away too much of the interesting harmonics, so I'm going to flip it into series mode and set up a bandpass filter. A high resonant bandpass filter. That's cool. And just trying to find the center point of my band filter. Yeah, I think that should do it. Okay, and we'll add in a little tiny bit of filter modulation with a super quick envelope from the filter envelope generator. Oh, that was cool. Okay, you know what? I want to modulate the cutoff with an LFO because I liked what happened when I just swooped the filter. So patching the triangle LFO into an attenuator at a low speed and going into the CV input for filter cutoff 1. And let's just see if I can oh, almost had it. There we go. That almost woody sound. I want that to be at the bottom of my filter swoop. There. Cool. Alright, sounding pretty good so far. Kind of classic ring modulated percussion patch. Okay, sounding good, but not super happy with the delay, so just gonna experiment with some different delay times, and I think we'll probably sync it to the arpeggiator. Modulating the delay time while it's synced would actually kind of complement this patch with the metallic sounds you get from the Matriarch's delay. But let's just find a good division and stick with it. I think I'll go with that for now, and we'll ping pong it. Okay, and let's get that bandpass a little steeper. I'm gonna crank up the resonance on our high pass filter. And let's get a little drive from the mixer, a little bit of saturation. Nice. Yeah, those lows are really popping now with the mixer cranked up. And just tinkering a tiny bit with the filter modulation. I don't need that much LFO. Okay, that sounds pretty good. I guess we could call it there. Oh, you know what we should do? Oh, yeah, I forgot I'm on arpeggiator. Let's switch off the arpeggiator and go into sequencer. I'm just going to record what I played and make a sequence so that we can now use ratchets and get a A little bit more interesting sequence. Cool. Ratchets are fun. Okay, and since we're using the sequencer, now we can easily transpose and just find a key that this actually sounds better in. Well, I like it better there. Because we have a static carrier wave modulating our program at the moment, as you can hear, playing different pitches, it could drastically alter the sound. I like the low pitch I get when I'm playing that C. So let's open up the envelope a little bit more and get some more of those high harmonics back in there. Cool. Okay, so that's basically this patch. You can just mess around and have a good time. We're going to move on to another one. Before we move on to another patch, let's take a look at a dedicated ring modulator to give us some ideas. I love ring modulation and use it quite often, and it just so happens that I've got a Moog MF102 Moogerfogger, don't know how to say that, in one of my effects drawers here. It's a real simple pedal, but awesome sounding. The frequency knob is the carrier frequency. It can be switched between high and low speeds. We'll talk about that in a moment. We've also got an LFO with rate control that can be switched between square and triangle waves, and the LFO amount as well as drive, and of course a mix knob. And on the back, we've got a bunch of goodies. We of course have our audio in and out. I thought they used a program instead of audio. Oh well. We've also got an out for LFO and carrier, as well as an input for carrier. So you can replace the internal sine wave, the carrier wave, with something else if you wish. Then there's expression pedal control inputs for LFO rate and amount, but also for mix control and the carrier frequency. But the cool thing is, if you plug a regular instrument TS cable into any of those expression pedal inputs, the pedal will accept CV control over any of those parameters. So you can control it with your synth. Super cool. If we take a look at the MF102 signal flow diagram, we can see that it's really simple. Oh, and look, there's program and carrier. I knew Moog used those terms. Anyway, it's basically what we already set up on the Matriarch, but we haven't tried using an LFO to modulate the frequency of the carrier wave yet, so that's something we'll have to try out. Another thing we should take note of is the frequency of the carrier. In the manual, it states the range is from 0.6 Hz to 80 Hz in the low setting and 30 Hz to 4 kHz in the high. The LFO, which can be a square or what they call a sine-like waveform, has a frequency range of 0.1 Hz, which is really slow, to 25 Hz. So that's also something to think about when we're setting up our Matriarch patch. I love they call it a sine-like wave. There's part of me that really wants to geek out and grab some cables and patch the pedal into a scope and show you the waveforms, both the LFOs and carrier, not to mention the characteristics of the drive, to see if we can reproduce it on the Matriarch. But we've already done so much theory, and that's going a little far for this video, so maybe I'll save that for another time. Anyway, I will set up a molt and compare the sound of the pedal in the Matriarch. All right, back to the Matriarch. So I'm going to molt oscillator 1, and I'm going to send a copy of that straight to the MoogerFogger pedal. And then I'll quickly set up our ring modulator again. So out of the molt into the input on the attenuator, out of the attenuator into the mixer, channel 1, I guess. And for the carrier wave, I'll use the mod bay again, the sine wave from the mod bay. So patching that into the CV input. Actually, you know what? We might want to look at this at the scope. So I'm going to use a molt cable and patch one end to the scope and one into our attenuator. All right, I know I just said it was probably going too far to examine the carrier and LFO waves from the MF102, but I already have them patched, so let's take a look. The blue trace is the carrier, the one we can hear, and the red trace is the LFO, and as you see, they're both triangle waves. They're not sine-like, they're triangle waves. How disappointing. I was hoping for some weird shaped wave. But who knows, maybe my scope's just not that accurate. So I'm going to compare the harmonic spectrum of the carrier with a triangle wave from the matriarch. They sound very similar, and you can see there's maybe a little less harmonic content in the carrier wave, but it's not a huge difference at all. Anyway, looks like the carrier and LFO on the Moogerfooger are both triangle waves. Alright, let's get to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is compare the Moogerfooger to our makeshift ring mod on the matriarch. So I'm feeding a triangle wave from the matriarch into the Moogerfooger. LFO is off and the carrier's in low frequency, so let's turn it on. So at the lowest setting, the carrier frequency is 0.6 hertz. So it's in the LFO range, not audio range yet. And we get a real nice sounding tremolo, just like we did with the matriarch. I actually prefer using a ring mod for tremolo than just standard VCA. Sounds great. All right, Doogie. Nice. Okay, let's check out the rest of the frequency range. Oh, but you know what? Let's go back down the octave, or maybe 2. Sounds a little bit better down here. We can hear the warmth of the ring modulator. And now we're starting to get into audio rate. Here we go. 20 hertz, we're starting to get some real ring modish sounds. And the maximum range of the low frequency setting for the carrier. So let's go into high and check that out. I always thought it was weird that there's a jump between the highest of the low and the lowest of the high. But I'll shut up so you can hear this thing. Oh, from glassy to pretty screechy. Cool, let's hear how the matriarch compares. Let's turn the LFO all the way counterclockwise. It sounds like we're getting a little saturation. I'm going to turn the oscillator down in the mixer. Anyway, our LFO is obviously quite a bit slower at the lowest stage than the Moogerfooger's carrier. Let's dial in that tremolo again. Still a little bit of saturation. Anyway, continue on. Sounding pretty good. It's getting a bit screechy, but between 4 and 5 o'clock, there's no pitch movement, and definitely not as high as the Moogerfooger. Alright, we've already checked out the specifications of the Moogerfooger. It says the carrier wave has a frequency range of 0.6 Hz to 80 Hz and 30 Hz to 4 kHz. It also states the LFO is 0.1 Hz to 25 Hz. In the Matriarch's manual, it lists the frequency range of the mod LFO at 0.07 Hz to 1.3 kHz. The utility LFO is listed at 0.07 Hz to 520 or 620 Hz with an offset. So the manual mentions an offset with the utility LFO, but no mention of the offset with the mod bay LFO. So we're going to have to check that out. But I'm not that worried. If we can't get the frequency range we need from the mod bay LFO, we've still got a lot of things that can oscillate on the Matriarch. We could loop an envelope generator, get the filter self-oscillating, or even simpler, use any of the 4 VCOs. So we've got lots of options, but let's see what happens with this offset first. Okay, I've got 2 tuners set up to measure the frequency of both the Moogerfooger's carrier and the Matriarch's LFO. So we can see the Moogerfooger's at around 4.1 kilohertz, and it looks like the Matriarch's at around 2.5 kilohertz. So let's patch a DC offset into the rate input of our LFO, and bang, our LFO disappears. It's because we've offset it by 10 volts, so we're probably gone way out of the human hearing range. So let's slowly bring this down. Oh, and there it is, 10 kilohertz. Okay, that's more than enough range. So let's see if we can bring this all the way down to 4 kilohertz. Wow, it looks like we barely needed to offset this at all. Let's bring back in the Moogerfooger so we can tune it by ear. Okay, we're getting there. just the tiniest little movements, you can see that I'm barely letting any of this offset through. I'm almost at 0. And this is real finicky. Let's see if I can get it. Ugh. Oh, damn. I hope your ears aren't bleeding. Mine are pretty darn close. Oh. Nailed it. Okay, mute. Ah, that's better. My ears were bleeding. Sorry to any doggies watching. Just wanted to get it as close to in tune as I could, so it's a good comparison. So we had to use a valuable attenuator as a DC offset, but we got the frequency range we needed from the Modbay LFO. And by setting the maximum frequency with our offset, our range knob on the LFO will now mimic the range of the carrier on the Moogerfooger, at least the high range. So let's test it. So brace yourself, here comes some more high notes. Yep, we got a range and it's pretty smooth. Sweet. Almost done with these high pitches, but let's compare them one more time. So I'm going to pan the Matriarch to the left and the Moogerfooger to the right. Huh. The top range is right, but we're getting a fundamental from the Matriarch. I think my attenuator's not centered. That's better. That's much better. If you're hearing a low frequency, make sure you've got your attenuator centered. Okay, one last test here. Let's check the low range. Boy, it sounds great though. And we can go all the way down to nothing. Great. So the range of the Modbay LFO now is actually greater than the range of the Moogerfooger. Oh, but that does sound silky and nice. Okay, let's try to match the bottom range of the high range of the Moogerfooger. It sounds like we're about, oh, that's easy to remember, 12 o'clock on the Matriarch. And we're pretty much bang on there. So center to fully clockwise is the top range. And our low range on our Moogerfooger would be 12 o'clock to counterclockwise on the Matriarch. Well, actually, probably 12 o'clock to around 9 o'clock, I guess. Well, I guess maybe 10 o'clock, but we got it. I'd say the Moogerfooger does have a warmer sound. It's a little less distorted, but the disadvantage, of course, is that to get the full range from the carrier, you have to flip a switch. Okay, moving on. Have a listen to the resulting waves as I increase the carrier frequency. Isn't that cool? One wave decreased in pitch and another increased until we got to a point where the lower wave disappeared completely and the top wave is an octave above the program. Let's take a closer look. The program, I guess I can stop using that term. It sounds a little nerdy. The audio source, the triangle wave from the Matriarch, is playing a C4, which is at 260 Hertz. The carrier is also at 260 Hertz. So according to our formula, 260 plus 260 gives us 520 Hertz, which of course is a C an octave up, a C5. But 260 minus 260, of course, equals 0, so that's why the second wave has disappeared. Cool. So, in a pinch, you could use a ring modulator as an octaver, but of course you'd have to make sure the carrier wave tracked the program exactly. Otherwise, it could get a little messy. It's pretty common to tune the carrier an octave, a fourth, or a fifth, or an octave and a fourth and a fifth above the program to get more consonant harmony from a ring modulator. So, if we tune the carrier an octave and a fifth above to a G, we'd get 260 plus 390, which equals 650 and gives us an E, a major third. And the difference between 390 and 260 is 130, so that's a C an octave lower. If we tuned in octaves, we'd get 260 plus 130 Hertz, which gives us 690 Hertz, which is an F, the fourth. and 260 minus 130, which again gives us a C. So let's try that out. Okay, so my carrier and program are in unison, so if I turn it on, there's our octave again. A little bit of that low octave is sneaking in. It's not perfectly in tune, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. Anyway, what was I going to do? Oh yes, we're going to go up to, bring the carrier up to a G. Just sounds so cool. There we go. Normally I just do it by ear. It's pretty easy to find the consonant harmonies if you just move slowly. But there we have it, a C and an E. Let's go for the C in octave. There it is, beautiful. So I'd like to be able to modulate between these two frequencies. I could do it by hand like this. But first, let's get it back in tune. Remember, the LFO on the Moogerfooger is bipolar, so I want to find my center position. And let's just pick a arbitrary rate and use our LFO to try to modulate between those 2 points. Not quite there. Let's try the max. Yeah, I think that's about it. No, max. And it sounds like my center's still a little bit off. Let's turn off this LFO. I got to turn down the amount. That's close enough. And we'll just have a listen. I just love that sound, the low C pulsing and then the higher wave swooping between the third and the octave. And if I use a square LFO, we get nice clean pitch transitions. Sweet. Okay, so let's see if we can do that on the Matriarch. First, let's try to get our carrier in tune. Okay, it's a lot easier to tune the Moogerfooger. This rate knob is incredibly sensitive, and it seems to be just jumping between pitches now. Come on. Maybe it has something to do with this offset, but I don't want to touch that. Oh, that fixed it. Okay, it's as close to in tune as I can get it. We're obviously hearing the low octave. Is that because I've got the offset on? Oh, you know what? I think I've just got it in the wrong octave. I'm just an octave too low. But I'm not going to mess with it. It's a real pain to tune, so I'm going to go with that for now. Okay, we're going to need an LFO to modulate our carrier, so I'm just going to use the triangle LFO. I'm going to use the attenuator as our amount control. Now, the problem is I'm already modulating the rate input with an offset. So instead of modulating the rate, I'm going to modulate the offset. It's not the exact same thing, so we're not going to get the exact same behavior, but oh, it's actually pretty close. Yeah, and we're getting a good range. Okay, not bad. Let's try the square wave. Oops. Yep, it's working. I'm not getting the same intervals I was getting as I got with the Moogerfooger. Much cleaner. I think there's a bunch of reasons why it's not as clean. I think first of all, I didn't tune my carrier to the right frequency to begin with. We're modulating an offset instead of the actual rate of the LFO. But it's close enough, I think I can call it a win for now and work on finessing it later. So back to the Moogerfooger for some more inspiration. See if we can get some more patch ideas. I'm going to play around with the LFO a little bit more and show you some of my favorite weirdo sounds. Going to use a square LFO and crank the LFO amount to its max and just play around. Awesome. Outer space. Now this needs some delay, so let's use this little El Capistan here. Super cool. But this will sound better if the Matriarch's not in drone mode and I can trigger keys, but that means I need an extra hand, so I'm going to use this old trick. Just attach two knobs together with an elastic band. I can get it on there. I can control the rate and frequency with one hand and trigger keys with my other. Oh, more delay. Super fun. Okay, that's something we're definitely going to have to try out with the Matriarch, and hopefully we don't need to use any rubber bands, but in a pinch they do a pretty good job. Okay, now before we put the Moogerfooger away, there's a couple other things we should check out for some patch inspiration. We've got a drive control and a mix knob we haven't looked at yet. So let's take a look at both of those. First, the drive. Lovely. And the drive circuit works on the dry signal as well. Oh, I've still got the delay on. Yeah, so drive works on the dry signal as well, as you can hear. And that alone could make a nice drone if you had some reverb. And the mix knob is pretty useful as well. Obviously just wet dry mix. And I use the mix knob the most probably for tremolo sounds. So bring the carrier down an octave and keyboard up an octave for a second, and you get a real natural tremolo. Here's full wet. Sounds good, but unrealistic. So let's bring the mix back down again. And then combine that with drive. Awesome. So full wet's a little over the top, but with the mix around 4, we're getting a real natural, wonderful tremolo. And the drive certainly helps a lot too. Okay, should we try these out on the Matriarch now? No, I got one more idea. We got to try this with a sequence. So let's get that sequence we recorded earlier in the video going. Yeah, slow that down a little bit. Oh yeah, I forgot I recorded ratchets. Okay, got to bring the sustain on the amp envelope down and get that punchy sequence back. Okay, sounding good. Okay, let's crank up that drive, get it on the verge of saturation. Nice. And flip into high mode. Now if we go full wet, oh, that sounds pretty good. Let's add a little drive. Sounds great, but we've lost our key center, so we can bring our key center back with mix. So mix will help keep it a little more consonant, but it's definitely going to help if we use a wave with a lot more harmonic content, like a pulse wave, for instance. Let's try narrow pulse, and you can hear how mangled that is. You can hear it's a pretty bright wave to begin with. So we can clean it up a little bit with mix and get away with using a little bit more drive if we bring the mix down. Tricky one. I'm going to try to time the LFO to our sequence and modulate the pitch to get a little bit more interesting harmonies happening. Now let's go back to triangle wave. That's better, not as distorted. Now the trick is trying to get the LFO in time with the sequence. Now it is possible to clock or reset the rate of the Moogerfooger via CV, like I mentioned earlier, but it it doesn't really sync up that well to a CV clock. Now, the good news is the Matriarch's pretty good at that. So this is something that might be a lot easier to do with the Matriarch. That's a bit drastic, but you get the idea. So that's something else we're going to try to do with our Matriarch ring modulator. It'll be easier to hear if I just slow everything down. So the general idea here is get some moving harmony from a single oscillator. Okay, so those are all things we're going to try to do on the Matriarch. All right, back to the Matriarch, and this time let's try setting this up in a slightly different way. So I'm still going to use VCO1 as our program source. It's still on triangle wave and just patching that into the attenuator. I'm going to go out of the attenuator into the noise input on the mixer, and I'll turn it up before patching the carrier wave in. I'm just trying to find the center point where the attenuator's closed. So as you can hear, even with the attenuator fully centered and closed, it still lets a tiny little bit of audio through. So it's not perfect, but it's good enough. Okay, now this time I'm going to use a VCO as a carrier wave, oscillator 2, put them in the same octave, make sure they're on triangle waves. And now I can use the pitch knob for frequency control. Great. All right, to start, make sure you're in unison or one voice mode on the paraphony switch. The absolute biggest advantage to using a VCO as a carrier wave on the Matriarch is that we can have the carrier key track the program wave, and that's a big deal. As you've heard from the previous examples, ring modulation sounds super cool, but because of how it works, some indifference of frequencies, it's really hard to use it in a lot of situations. It's just so dissonant and weird. That's of course a big part of the sound, but wouldn't it be great if you could keep the overall timbre and tuning of a ring modulated source consistent across the keyboard? Well, you can if you can key track the carrier. So let's hear it. Beautiful, there we go. And it's going to be consistent across the entire keyboard. So let's try something even weirder. That's good. Awesome, works perfectly. If you want to keep a static carrier and go for the old school sound, just switch paraphony to 4-voice mode. The Matriarch's voice assignment will only change the pitch of the subsequent oscillators if you play more than one note at a time. And there we have it, old school ring mod. Let's go back to key tracking though. That sounds great. Okay, now you've probably noticed we're not getting a huge range from our frequency knob, but we can sort that out by switching octaves just like we did with the Moogerfooger pedal. That sounds good. So let's take advantage of the Matriarch's paraphonic sequencer and voice allocation and make a sequence that transposes the carrier frequency at different points of the sequence. So go into record mode, and I'm going to switch over to 4-voice mode, and I'll make a sequence with some single notes and 2-note chords. Just stick with a 5th for now. Okay, if I'm in unison mode, both oscillators will key track, and the timbre and tuning will remain consistent. Sweet. All right, now if I switch over to 4-voice mode, the carrier will only change frequencies when I played chords in the sequence. Cool. Sounds good down there. Let's get it a little pluckier. Nice. For some variation, I could switch paraphony modes on the fly. Let's soup this up a bit, add some delay, and speed it up a bit. Awesome. Remember, we are still ring modulating the program wave, so although I played a C on the keyboard, that's not the resultant pitch. The tuning remains consistent, but you'd have to transpose if you wanted to use this with other harmonic material. Now let's deal with the range of the frequency knob. Even though we can change octaves with the switch, we're still only getting a range of plus or minus a fifth from the knob. So to global settings. In C#1, we can change the range of the frequency knob. So if we push F3, we're going to get 24 semitones or 2 octave range now. Much better. Sweet. All right, so let's try to replicate some of those weirdo effects we got from the MoogerFogger pedal. So we need an LFO to modulate the frequency of the carrier, and luckily that's all set up for us. Just switch pitch amount to oscillator 2 and 4 only. And there we go. So we can use the pitch amount knob in the mod bay to set our maximum. And let's just find a nice speed for our LFO. We got a bunch of different waves to choose from, but let's start with a square wave, just like the MoogerFogger pedal. Now the mod wheel will control the amount of modulation. All right, let's add in some matriarch delay. We don't need a pedal this time. And we're still key tracking the carrier wave. So our space sounds are a little more consonant, a little. But we can go full weirdo if we want, if we just play a chord. Now, when I was making the space sounds on the pedal, I was modulating rate and amount at the same time. We're not going to need to use an elastic band. All we're going to need to do is patch mod wheel out of the back of the matriarch into rate input, and there we have it. Much more authentic space sounds. And by using the mod bay, we've got 6 different waves to choose from, not just 2. Let's get some sad R2D2 sounds. A bit too much feedback. All right, so we can definitely make weirdo 1950s space sounds on the matriarch. So we've partially fixed the range issue with the carrier, but is it possible to get slow LFO speeds for tremolo effects from a VCO? Yes, it is. We just need to apply a DC offset. So I'm going to use this attenuator down here, plug the output of it into the pitch input of oscillator 2, and there we have it, down to LFO speeds. And if I bring the octave switch of the VCO all the way to the bottom, I still can have my LFO, and by turning the attenuator up, you hear we're in audio range, and we still get all those high frequencies. So now I can control the frequency of my carrier wave with the keyboard, with the attenuator, or the pitch knob. So I've got a bunch of options for future patching and modulation. Sweet. Okay, let's talk about drive and saturation now. The MoogerFogger had such beautiful saturation, and if you've had your matriarch for more than 5 minutes, you know so does the matriarch. Just turn it up in the mixer. Oh, clipping my input a bit. Now if I turn up oscillator 1 in the mixer, that will be my dry signal. So we have wet, dry control using our mixer. So if we add a little dry signal into the mix, we're maintaining our fundamental. So let's just dial in a nice bass sound. Cool. Okay, what now? Well, why don't we get the arpeggiator going and mess around a bit. Nice. Okay, let's play with that drive. Let's saturate the dry signal. Sweet. Oops, okay, my camera just ran out of batteries, but we're back. I'm just going to sequence that arpeggiated pattern instead of using the arpeggiator this time, and we'll pick up where we just left off. But I'm going to change up my harmony a little bit and maybe go for a lead sound instead of a bass sound. Still want it to be dirty though. Cool. And I'm just going to mess around, experiment a little bit before we get back to trying new things. I like plucky ring modulated sounds. The trick is getting enough length in the decay that you don't lose all the top harmonic content. Let's mess around with the filter a little bit. Maybe go into series, high pass mode, set up a band pass filter. That's okay. Add some delay, and I think I'll sync it to the arpeggiator. And remember, I'm not key tracking the carrier VCO, so we're getting that scary, inharmonic, old school sound. But I'm not happy with the frequency range here, so I'm going to play around with the VCO1's frequency, the program wave. Oh, and that sounds pretty good if I just switch between the two modes. And you got to kind of be careful when you switch because the carrier wave will track the arpeggiator sequence at different points. Oh, switch too soon. Nice. Up. I think you can probably hear what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to switch at the opportune moment. Oh. Anyway, with some practice, you could probably do this pretty well. Or you could just sample it, I guess. Anyway, that was fun. Okay, continuing on. The Moogerfooger's drive happened before the ring modulation circuit. Now with the patch set up like this, it's the opposite. Its drive is happening after the ring mod because we're using the mixer to create drive, and obviously the way it's patched now, it's after the attenuator. So I'm going to use this little Splix passive mixer as my actual mixer, and I'm going to use the Matriarch's mixer as my drive circuit. Wait a minute. What am I doing here? Been doing this video for a couple hours and getting a bit tired. How am I going to do this? Okay, so I'm going to patch out of the VCO into the Splix. So that's our dry input. And I'm going to, wait a minute. Out of the mixer first into the attenuator. So that's going to take care of our drive. Out of the VCO into the Splix and out of the ring modulator into a mult. And then I got to go out of the mult. I'm going to bypass the mixer, so I'm going to go out of the mult into each input of the filter. That way none of the normal audio from the mixer goes into the filter, and we can keep a stereo filter. So now the mixer is going to be our drive control, and the little Splix passive mixer will be the mix between wet and dry. Now, if you're going to use a passive mixer like this little Splix as an audio mixer, sometimes you're going to run into some weird issues, like if it's all the way one direction, the signal will cut out. But this one seems to be working okay. I was dialing up some more sounds. Everything else is remained the same in the patch. I'm just trying to find some sounds I like. Nice. Nice, so let's try out that drive. Wow, big difference. Cool. All right, I think we're going to try to make a drone or maybe a bell. Already kind of sounds like a bell. So let's go for a drone and increase the attack time on the amp envelope generator and just throw a ton of delay on this. Nice long release. Now I can just manually add drive as I play to get a little more harmonics. Sweet. So now we've got a ring modulated drone with a drive. So because the mixer is now before the ring modulator, I can add multiple oscillators to my ring modulator. It's going to get pretty ugly pretty fast. But that's the general idea. Oh. Ring modulated drone with drive. All right, we're getting near the end here. I've got a couple more concepts I can show you, maybe give you a few more patch ideas. We've got 2 unused VCOs and still have pretty much everything else open, so why not go for a dual ring mod patch? So this time I'll use oscillator 3, plug that into attenuator, make sure the attenuator's centered, and oscillator 4 wave out, we're going to go into the CV input, just like we did for the first ring modulator, and out of the attenuator into the mixer. Use the input for oscillator 3. I'm going to flip over to unison mode to make sure that both of the oscillators are playing a C, and I'll tune my carrier waves. Tune them up a fifth, I think. So remember, that way we get a major 10th interval from our ring modulator. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. There we go. So they're in unison. Wow, that sounds huge. Awesome. All right, gonna bring them back in the mixer a little bit, but keep the saturation happening. All right, so let's try out some duo keys. So I'm in duo paraphony mode. Maybe go for a glassy sound, so I'm gonna add a lot of release. Beautiful. And a little delay never hurt. Okay, there you go, a dual ring mod key patch. That's fairly self-explanatory, so let's continue on. And I'm just going to record another sequence, the same sort of idea as we did with the last patch, except now we actually have 2 voices. So I'm going to make a sequence alternating between 1 and 2 notes again. And again, I'll stick with perfect intervals. They seem to work pretty well with ring modulators. Nice. Now remember, the Matriarch's going to automatically take care of voice allocation for you if you're in dual mode and you've got a 2-note sequence. So there's ring mod 1. And you can hear that ring mod 2 is only triggered on the notes that I played chords on. So thank you, Matriarch, for your voice allocation. And again, we can try the old switcheroo between 1 and 2 note voices, but there's another idea for you. So how about a stereo duo patch? So we know that the mixer output of the Matriarch is in mono, so let's bypass the mixer and just go straight into the filter inputs. And there we go, stereo dual ring mod. Let's mess around with this one a little bit. Sounds kind of cool. So we need to leave our mixer in stereo mode. If we switch into series or parallel, we'll go back into mono. So I'm in low pass mode and just going to dial in a real quick envelope. Keep that pluck happening. Don't want to cut off too much of the high harmonics though. So again, the trick is having enough release. There we go. In our envelope generators. That way we don't lose too much of the high harmonics and the character of the ring mod. Okay, and our mod bay is still set to pitch modulation for oscillators 2 and 4, which are carrier waves, so that works out pretty well. So let's dial in some modulation. Start with some tremolo. Nice. But the LFOs on the Matriarch can go into audio rate, so let's check that out. Sweet. So now we're getting frequency modulation of our carrier waves of our ring modulated oscillators. I think the frequency modulation is kind of winning out, but I'm still hearing that harmony, which is cool. Now with some patience, you could probably really dial in some pretty cool sounds. Oh, nice. I like that. Oh, not that. Let's go for, again, a more percussive sound. Get rid of that sustain and tighten up the decay. Keep the release long enough that we can hear the harmonics hanging through at the end of the note. Back in the beginning of this video, I was talking about trying to use this square wave LFO on the Moogerfooger to modulate the pitch of the carrier waves in time with the sequence. The trick to doing that, I found with the Matriarch, is not using the sync input on the LFO, but the rate input. That way you can get divisions and multiplications of the clock or arpeggiator's gate in this case. Let's see if we can dial something in that sounds okay. We gotta make sure things are somewhat in tune here first. Okay, so going into unison mode to make sure my oscillators are in unison. The LFO is still modulating the pitch of the carriers, it's just moving really slow. There, now the gate's low, so I'm gonna wait till the gate turns high and then I'll use the pitch knob to find the max point of my modulation. Okay, good to go, so I'm just gonna get this to a pitch I like. By the way, it is possible in the global settings to turn the square LFO unipolar, which would make this much easier. But I kind of like the chaos. Yeah, that's definitely chaotic. Okay, but let's see if we can't make this a little bit more musical. I'm going to cheat a bit and use delay to mask some of the drastic timbre changes. So if there's a big wash of delay, we're not going to notice those as much. So turn it up. Well, that was a bit much. Bringing the feedback to about 12 o'clock. Okay, and let's open up the filter to let some of those high notes through. It's better. Mess around a little bit with the envelope so the notes aren't quite so choppy. Getting there. Okay, let's change up the delay divisions. Oh, nice. There we go. Dotted rhythms always just sound so awesome. It's a little too much though. Bring that feedback back down and I think we're okay. That's pretty sweet. Okay, so we've just learned how to set up a duo stereo panned ring modulation patch with pitch modulation somewhat synced to the arpeggiator. So now instead of using an LFO to modulate the pitch of the carrier waves, why don't we try out using an envelope generator? Oh, I thought of something else before we do the envelope stuff. By bypassing the mixer, we've bypassed the Matriarch's paraphony VCA, so voices will now ring through even when I play other notes. Let's make that more obvious. I'm going to turn oscillator 2 up the octave. So now you can easily hear that both voices are still present, even if I change notes on one of the voices. Normally the mixer would mute a voice not being played. Cool. Okay, let's put oscillator 2 back to where it was and get back to messing around with our ring modulation. This time, I gotta go into unison mode to get both my voices in the same note. Okay, so the idea is instead of using an LFO, why not take advantage of the fact that the Matriarch has envelope generators? So let's try using an envelope generator to modulate the pitch of our carrier waves. So out of the filter envelope generator into an attenuator to control the amount, into a molt, and then we're going into the pitch input, not the linear FM input, the pitch input for oscillators 2 and 4. So let's start by raising an attack so we get a pitch swoop. And I'm going to turn everything else to 0. Oh, my attenuator's inverted, so we're getting swoops down instead of up. But that sounds cool. Go back into dual mode. And let's put the attenuator into positive territory and go for an over-the-top pitch swoop. There we go. And with decay, sustain, and release at 0, just falls down to our original pitch as soon as the attack stage finishes. Okay, now decay, not sustain. Decay will cause our pitch to fall gently back to our original pitch. Maybe it's not that gentle. Now, remember, if you release the keys before the attack stage finishes, it just goes straight to the decay phase. So hold it this time. Okay, now if we turn attack, decay, and release all to 0, then sustain becomes a macro control for both carrier oscillators. And you can do your pitch swoops by hand. Now I've got the attenuator set pretty high, so if you wanted to be tasteful, you could probably make smaller pitch movements, but I just want to demonstrate this. Okay, on to the next idea. Okay, why not use the Matriarch to cross-modulate and process another synth? In this example, I've got 2 ring modulators set up, just like the last patch. I'm going to process the audio from my DFAM and essentially just using the Matriarch as an effects pedal, but one that can interact with the DFAM. I'm clocking the DFAM with the Matriarch and sending the Matriarch sequencer CV to modulate a few parameters on the DFAM. I have the output of the DFAM malted and patched into the stereo ring modulators. So let's hear it. Okay, why not go a step further and use the Matriarch to process audio? In this example, I'm going to use 3 ring modulators. Attenuator 1, or ring mod 1, is going to process a guitar. The carrier wave is a sine LFO at around 30 Hz, and I've got the input and output patched directly to and from my DAW. Ring mod 2 is going to modulate a kick drum. The carrier is the triangle utility LFO. The rate of the LFO is being modulated by the Matriarch's clock, which is synced to the DAW. The amount of rate modulation is being attenuated by Splex. Again, direct in and out from DAW to ring mod. And I'm going to use ring mod 3 to process drum overheads. This time the output from the DAW is going into the Matriarch's mixer, which I'm using to add some saturation and drive, then into the ring mod. The carrier is VCO2 at around 1 kHz. Setup in the DAW is easy. It's just the same way you'd use any piece of external hardware. You just need an I/O plugin. I'm using Studio One, and the I/O plugin's called Pipeline. Oh, and you might want to check the phase on your return. I had to flip it on the guitar and the kick drum. Okay, I'll play you the loop, a little bit of it dry and a little bit of it wet. Okay, one more patch idea, and this one's semi-generative. I've always liked the idea of having variable timbres, as well as pitch and rhythm, of course, in a generative patch, so figured I'd try something out with ring modulation. This has been an epically long video, so I'm going to skip the patch walkthrough and just give a quick explanation, then a quick demo and samples of some of the stuff I came up with on my first pass with it. I'm currently working on the second volume of my Matriarch patch book and think I need a little more time with this patch, so I'm going to save the walkthrough and patch diagram for later, but this explanation should be enough that you can try to put something like it together by yourself. I will say this patch would be much easier and probably sound a little better with a few external modules. A logic module to help with rhythm creation would be the first I'd add, or maybe a random clock or CV generator. That would free up 2 of the oscillators, as you'll see when I explain the patch. But I wanted to try it just with the Matriarch and see if it was possible. Okay, let's take a quick look at this patch. Oscillator 3 is acting as a master clock, not as a VCO, and oscillator 4 as a clock divider. I did that a while back in a video. I can't remember which one right now, but I'll track it down and put a link in the description if you're curious and want to know how to set that up. Oscillator 1 and 2 are the program waves. The Modbay LFO is the carrier for oscillator 1, and the utility LFO is the carrier for oscillator 2. The sequencer is being clocked by oscillator 3, and I'm definitely going to experiment with that rate division knob. The gate out of the arpeggiator is triggering the filter envelope generator, which is modulating VCF1 and VCA1. Oscillator 4 is triggering the amp envelope generator, which is triggering the VCF2 and VCA2. The sequencer CV is malted, and I'll be using that to modulate a bunch of different things: pitch of the oscillators, rate of the sequencer or LFOs, but most importantly, the pulse width of oscillator 4, which will cause random subdivisions of the clock. I love that quirky metallic weird sound you get when you modulate the delay time when it's synced to the sequencer, so I'm probably going to try modulating that as well. At the moment, the keyboard CV is controlling the pitch of oscillator 2, but I'm going to change that around as I mess around. Okay, that's about it. So let's see what happens. For this patch to work, you also need to make sure you turn off local arpeggiator control and sequence keyboard control in the global settings. Okay, that's it. Hope this works. Thanks for watching.